Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac joining us on the Western Hotline to talk cap stuff, Bills cap. I sent Mike a message and said, are you due on the afternoon show? I feel like, Mike, we've got you on the station once a week, every couple weeks, especially this time of year when we're trying to dig into what the Bills can and can't do, how we could possibly see them work the cap, and what pie-in-the-sky ideas are feasible. So, good morning. Thanks for taking some time today.
Good morning. My pleasure. Yeah, it's a busy week for everybody here, and look, it's one of those years with the Bills that there's not a lot of clear path forward, right? It's kind of like a lot of guessing games that we have to assess here, especially with these trade requests and the window of contention that they're in. So it's a good time to talk it out.
So these pie-in-the-sky ideas, you kind of said it there. The path forward, in years past, it's been kind of easy. A year ago, it was, sure, if you cut Mitch Morse, you'll save this. If you let Gabe walk, if you cut Poyer, Hyde, and Trey White, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's your 6 moves to do. Right now, we're kind of waiting. Vaughn is the only one that we know would be obvious, and even that one I'm not quite sold on. Sam Martin. Mike, what are the ways that they can clear up space, and just how much room could they clear up?
Yeah, it's a complicated offseason when the punter is the first move they make, right? That's usually a sign that there's going to be some sticky moments here. The Vaughn one's sitting out there, and you have to think that there's just some back and forth happening right now about the possibility of keeping him on something similar to last year. But, the outright release is almost $8.5 million cleared, and oh, by the way, they're about $8.5 million over the cap right now. So, in terms of cap compliancy, that's a pretty simple one if you have to get to that point of the roster, and then it gets really complicated because now you're talking extensions to lower cap hits, and that takes time. That takes obviously upfront cash and a lot more minutia. So, I'm sure you've talked about those ad nauseum. There's a lot of ways to go here, right? There's no obvious cap cuts. There's no obvious just clearing moments. Even somebody like Kyer Elam, fully guaranteed. You need help with that one in terms of clearing cap space. So I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to start chopping the roster like they did last year because, quite frankly, doing that's not going to give you much cap space, and that's certainly what they're looking for over the next 3 to 4 days here.
Are we in a spot? I kind of haven't thought about it this way before, but do players have some leverage in this moment in certain circumstances, or teams alternately, because there's a bit of a deadline, right? If the Bills want to start bidding on anybody and doing any sort of business and adding players, they know they need somebody to play ball or get out of town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, right? That's exactly probably what Greg Rousseau's camp is doing right now because he's sitting there with a higher cap hit and a need for a contract, and I would imagine that most of these contract situations, Benford and Cook, to some degree McGovern, are in those boats as well. So, yeah, you've got agents sitting here using every leverage piece possible in terms of price points and timing and all of that, and that's certainly a situation that we're sitting here. And, oh, by the way, the Josh Allen situation might be the biggest one, which is highest cap hit, easy to convert, but $14.5 million of cash, so something's going to give there soon.
Yeah, so what would that look like? That's not an extension, right? Or it's just a pay? Would that be announced as like a pay raise that would also lower their cap this year?
I'm starting to lean more in that direction with 4 years left, right? It's just kind of unprecedented to rip it up and start it over, even though that's probably what he's worth right now, is a start over and a reset of the market, really, from the league standpoint. My guess is they do what they did last year, which is let's take money from a couple years down the road, make them happy, add some new incentives, make everything work, and then probably after 2025, it's no holds bar. We've got to start this thing over. Could be talking upwards of $65 million a year for a player of his caliber. So, it's just where we're headed, right? $300 million salary cap next year. So, my guess is sweeten the pot this year, and then we talk about gigantic numbers next offseason.
Mike Ginnitti, managing editor for Spotrac, joining us on the Western Hotline ahead of the start of the league year, which will be middle of next week for the Bills and for everybody else around the NFL. Mike, these big-name trade bait guys, Hendrickson, Garrett, DK Metcalf, is the trade market, you think, this year maybe a little friendlier for these teams that are trying to get it done than years past, or at least for the Bills? Because while they have work to do, last year they were so stuck they couldn't even bring in a Brandon Ayuk because you need the room to bring that in and then redo the deal. They can get to a spot where they could feasibly do any of these big guys?
Oh, yeah. Look. As much as we're sitting here saying it's complicated, if they needed to free up $25 million of room to bring in a big fish, they could do it, right? They could do it pretty easily, and they've got players that play ball in that regard. It's also, I think, an explosive trade market, and for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of players who are sort of aging out of their current teams in terms of what the financials are going to look like, and it's kind of a down free agent year, as I'm sure you've talked about as well, right? It's just kind of a stuck year in that regard. So for a lot of teams, especially teams in contention like Buffalo, I think that trade market is the best avenue forward for some of these positional needs, and certainly this edge rusher one is getting bigger and bigger every time we look at the update the refresh X here.
I want to ask you about the Eagles and what they do. I was joking with Joe earlier, and I've been kind of on this little thing lately. I've been Eagles pilled. Like, my brain is now obsessed with what the Eagles do, which is they just spend more and push it later. Is it that simple? And is there anything stopping any other team from doing what Philadelphia does other than ownership committing crazy dollars? Like, how different are the Eagles financially in the way that they've been doing it?
Yeah, you nailed it. Howie Roseman gets all the credit because he's the one pulling the trigger on these things. But if Jeffrey Lurie isn't allowing him to do this, right, with signing bonuses basically every offseason to most notable players in that roster, it's not happening. And there's 31 other organizations that don't operate that way, that aggressively, that every offseason, right? So it takes a huge buy-in from everybody involved in the process. And, oh, by the way, it's also extremely risky, as we're seeing in New Orleans right now, right? They've been doing this for a decade without a viable quarterback since the Drew Brees era, and they are completely stuck in the mud right now. They're in a world of hurt to the point of where they're going to have to extend players they don't want to keep in order to become cap compliant. That's what's going to happen over the next 3 days in New Orleans, which is just bonkers. But that's the price you pay when you love your quarterback. And I realize I'm giving a lot of credit to the quarterback position. It's that important. When you love your quarterback, you have the carte blanche to do something like this, which is just continue to roll over 2-year extensions and keep everybody happy in the organization and keep free agents wanting to join that organization. So it's a great model to follow when you're hitting on all cylinders, and when you're not, it is one of the worst situations to be in.
A great model to follow. This is another, as I've just kind of started to learn a little bit more about this, and of course, you know what you're doing here. Is it really? Do you think that sometimes, I'm not making it about any team here, that the salary cap is used by GMs as an excuse to protect owners?
Oh, yeah. And to, damper prices and to not sign players that they're a little fringy about, for sure. It's definitely still used as that. But I think that's going to go away. Not go away. It's going to diminish. And here's why. It's going up 11% every year. You're right. The cat's out of the bag, the elephant's out of the room. It's just too darn explosive right now in terms of the financials of this league and the revenue of this league to really turn around and say, we can't do this anymore. Now, you're going to have ownerships that won't spend to the cap, right? And there's a limit that they have to do that every couple of years. But you're going to have it's a bit of a cat and mouse here, Jeremy, where you're going to have the big guys winning and you're going to have the smaller guys sort of trying to keep up here. So it's a situation where Philadelphia is doing this, and they're doing this maybe better than anybody right now because of the current model. But because the salary cap is what it is, there should be at least half of the league going this route, pushing things down the line, constantly turning over these extensions, because it is the right way to be aggressive in this league with this revenue stream. Is
the narrative, for all the Eagles do right on that front and how it works there, are the Bengals the complete antithesis? Like, with the narrative is they don't spend. So how different, I guess, are they from what other teams in the league are doing, especially like Philadelphia?
Yeah, let me push back on that a little bit. They do spend. They have spent, right? They have given proper positions proper money over the years. Here's the difference, and it's kind of what we're alluding to here with the Eagles. The Eagles turn it over and over and over. They'll give you a 4-year deal. You get a new one in 2 years, or in Barkley's case, after year one. That's how they do it. Cincinnati gives you good, fair, above average contracts and say, we want you to honor these contracts. So the majority of their major players have finished their contracts. That's not going to happen anymore in this league, unfortunately, unless we get fully guaranteed contracts, which certainly doesn't look good right now. That's the difference. They want you to honor their contract, and to some degree, the Dallas Cowboys are very, very similar, right? Two of those teams that do spend cash but feel like they don't because they're not aggressively changing their contract structures over and over again. I think that model is probably going away, especially with free agency and this trade stuff getting so aggressive. But we'll see. It's two different ways to do it. It's been successful in both regards, but I think that the Eagles model is probably where more teams are headed right now.
Mike Ginnitti, Spotrac managing editor. Okay, to wrap up then, Mike, do I have your blessing, whether it's viewed as irresponsible or not, to say, forget it all, push it all to 2030, you have Josh Allen, and spend on everything possible?
Just
I don't want to
rack up the credit card.
I mean, when Bean said I don't want to ever get to a spot where I have to tear it down with Josh Allen, I want to say I want you to have to maybe tear it down in 2030. Like, now is the time. I don't want to hear a word about responsibility. I need all of it.
I don't know why you wouldn't go that route. Truly,
okay.
Right? I put together a Josh Allen extension projection just locally because I'm a huge nerd, right? I put it into a spreadsheet. I tried to give the guy a $62 million a year contract. I was able to do it with $308 million of cash and keep his cap hits in the 40s for basically 3 to 4 seasons here, using the Philadelphia structure, using 5 bonuses out, baked into the cake. It's possible. It's possible to give Josh top of the market money, keep his cap hits within 20% of the league cap, and continue to aggressively sign this roster. Now, you got to hit on draft picks. That's the other secret sauce Philadelphia's hit, right? You got to hit on draft picks. You can't give away all of your draft picks, like I know maybe some people want to do right now with a Myles Garrett or a Trey Hendrickson. But it's possible. It's certainly possible to just say everything matters, everything works. Every offseason we're going to be uberly aggressive because this is the Josh Allen era, and we don't get these every year.
Right.
Just to wrap very quickly, it's 2 things, right? It's the draft picks, and you've got to. What was the number you said? Like, are you signing a $300 million check like today? Like, the owner's got to have that ready.
Escrow right away.
Escrow, okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least 75% of that. That's just the going rate. Dak Prescott got about 80% practically guaranteed up front. That's where we're headed now.
Okay. All right. Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Always great work. Spotrac.com, Mike Ginnitti, managing editor. See, Joe, are you Eagles pilled yet?
I like it.
Listeners, everybody out there, are you ready? Forget it all. You got to do it all. It's time. It's the time. You want a Super Bowl? You're gonna have to go buy one. Garrett and Metcalf and Hendrickson. There you go. You heard it? All right, we'll get a break in.